The boardroom was a cavern of polished wood and glass, where the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the faint hum of nervous chatter. I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on me, a mix of anticipation and dread swirling in my stomach as I prepared to present my clause. The fluorescent lights above cast a stark glare on the faces of the board members, but it was the CEO's expression that held my focus. Mr. Thompson, a man with a reputation for arrogance, leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. The moment hung in the air, a fragile thread connecting my hopes to the impending laughter. I unfolded my proposal, the meticulously crafted document trembling slightly in my hands. I had poured my heart into this, believing it could shift the company's trajectory. Yet as I spoke, I could see the smirk creeping onto Mr. Thompson's lips. When I finished, the laughter erupted like a wave crashing against a cliff. "Is this a joke?" he scoffed, his voice dripping with derision. I felt my cheeks flush with a heat that was both anger and embarrassment. The dismissive wave of his hand sent a clear signal. I was not to be taken seriously. The laughter of my colleagues echoed in my ears, a chorus of mockery that twisted my stomach into knots. I stood there, heart racing, grappling with the sudden realization of my vulnerability. I had stepped into the lion's den, and now I was the prey. As Mr. Thompson continued to ridicule my idea, I could feel my resolve hardening. This moment, this unexpected disappointment, would not define me. I would not allow his arrogance to silence my voice. The meeting ended, but the sting of his laughter lingered long after. I returned to my office, the door clicking shut behind me, and leaned against it, breathing heavily. I was alone with my thoughts, the shadows in the room closing in as I replayed the scene in my mind. Could I really challenge a man like him? The walls of my office felt like they were closing in as I sat at my desk, surrounded by the sterile glow of fluorescent lights. The hum of the air conditioning was a constant reminder of the pressure that hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My fingers drummed nervously against the polished surface, the wood cool beneath my palms, contrasting sharply with the heat of my anxiety. I was replaying the earlier board meeting in my mind, the laughter that had erupted when I presented my clause still ringing in my ears like a cruel taunt. Maya, my best friend and confidant, burst through the door, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "You okay?" she asked, her voice laced with an urgency that made my heart race even faster. I could feel the tension in her posture, the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, mirroring my own restlessness. "I don't know, Maya, I thought they would see the value in my idea," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and frustration. How could they dismiss something that I believed could change the company for the better? Maya stepped closer, her presence grounding me. "You have to confront him, Stephanie. You can't let him think he can just brush you aside like that. You know what this means for us, for the team. You have to stand up for your ideas." Her words ignited a flicker of resolve within me. I remembered why I had proposed the clause in the first place, because I believed in the potential it held. The stakes were high, and I could feel the weight of my ambition pressing down on me. I couldn't let the CEO's arrogance stifle my voice. Taking a deep breath, I nodded, determination settling in my chest. "You're right, I need to talk to him. I can't let this slide. I won't be dismissed." As I gathered my notes, the sound of my heart pounding echoed in my ears, each beat a reminder of my purpose. I glanced at Maya, who gave me an encouraging smile, her eyes sparkling with support. I could feel the bond between us strengthening, a silent promise that I wouldn't face this battle alone. The moment of confrontation was looming closer, and I could sense that this was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. My resolve was solidifying, and I was ready to face the CEO, no matter the outcome. The atmosphere in the office felt suffocating as I turned on the television, the news blaring loudly in my home. The screen flickered with images of stock market graphs descending like a roller coaster, the ticker scrolling ominously below. My heart raced at the sight of the headline, "Company stock plummets by $1.2 billion, CEO blames recent cost-cutting measures." The words echoed in my mind, each syllable amplifying the growing dread within me. I gripped the remote tightly, my knuckles white against the black plastic. What had I done? As the reporter continued, discussing the implications and the reactions from various analysts, I felt a familiar pit in my stomach. I had envisioned this moment, the fallout from the CEO's arrogance, but I never anticipated it would hit me so hard. The camera panned to Mr. Thompson, his face a mask of anger and defiance as he dismissed the concerns of investors. "This is just a minor setback," he said. I could almost hear his sneer through the screen, and it ignited a fire in my chest. My phone buzzed insistently on the table, a stark reminder of the calls awaiting me. I hesitated, glancing at the screen to see Maya's name flash across it. Taking a deep breath, I answered, her voice crackling through the receiver. "Stephanie, you need to talk to me. The atmosphere at the office is unbearable. People are angry and they're looking for someone to blame. I know, Maya, I'm just trying to process everything. This was supposed to be for the best," my voice trailed off, uncertainty creeping in. I recalled the moment I had first proposed my ideas, the laughter that followed, the dismissive wave of Mr. Thompson's hand. "I can't believe he would let this happen. He's going to ruin everything. You need to confront him. This isn't just about the company anymore, it's about you. You can't let him walk all over you like this." Her voice held a tone of urgency that resonated with me, and I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest. I hung up, my mind racing with possibilities and consequences. The thought of standing up to Mr. Thompson was daunting. I closed my eyes, envisioning the board meeting where I had felt so small, so ridiculed. The laughter had echoed in my ears long after I had left the room, but now it transformed into a catalyst for my anger. I would not be reduced to a punchline. Days passed, and the news of the stock drop hung heavily over me like a storm cloud. At the office, whispers filled the air, a toxic mix of fear and anger swirling around the break room. Each glance from my colleagues felt like an accusation, as if they were silently blaming me for the chaos. I could see their frustration etched on their faces, the disappointment mingling with uncertainty. "Stephanie, you need to come to the meeting tomorrow. Things are getting out of hand," David said, his voice low as we stood side by side near the coffee machine. His eyes were filled with concern, and I could sense the tension in his posture. I nodded, swallowing hard, my throat dry. As I walked through the office, the fluorescent lights flickered above, the hum of machinery a constant reminder of the pressure mounting around me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a visceral reaction to the impending confrontation. The weight of the moment loomed large, and I could almost taste the bitterness of my own fear. That night I sat on my couch, surrounded by the dim light of my living room, lost in thought. The flickering shadows danced around me, mirroring my internal struggle. I wanted justice, not just for myself, but for everyone he had hurt. My fingers brushed against the edges of my laptop, the cool surface a grounding presence as I began to outline a plan. It was time to take a stand. I would not let him dictate my fate any longer. I needed to gather my thoughts to formulate my next steps. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but I was determined to reclaim my voice. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about respect. And I would do whatever it took to make him understand that his arrogance had consequences. My heart surged with a mix of fear and resolve as I prepared for the battle ahead. Sitting in my home office, the night felt oppressively silent, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, each tick a reminder of the time slipping away. The glow of my laptop screen illuminated my face, casting shadows that danced across the walls like specters of my past decisions. Papers were strewn across my desk, my plans for reconciliation, half-formed ideas scribbled in frantic handwriting, yet they felt hollow, devoid of the conviction I so desperately sought. The weight of my actions pressed down on my chest. I could almost feel the air thickening with doubt. Maya had offered to come over, her presence a comforting balm against my spiraling thoughts. As I waited, I replayed the events of the board meeting in my mind, the tense atmosphere suffocating me. The CEO's dismissive laughter still echoed in my ears, a cruel reminder of my futile attempts to assert control over a situation that had spiraled out of my grasp. I clenched my fists, the wood of my desk digging into my palms as I fought back the anger that threatened to spill over. When she finally arrived, Maya's concerned gaze swept over the chaos of my office, her brow furrowing as she took in the sight. "You're going to drive yourself crazy if you keep this up, Steph," she said softly, stepping closer. I could see the worry etched on her face, her typically bright demeanor dimmed by my turmoil. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, the tension in my shoulders slowly easing as she placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "I just need to figure this out before the next board meeting." "I can't let him win, Maya," I replied, my voice steady but laced with desperation. As I spoke, I felt the heat of anger flare in my chest, and I had to remind myself that revenge could cloud my judgment. My mind flickered to the potential outcomes of my actions. What if I pushed too hard? Would it backfire, leaving me with nothing but ashes and regret? "You're not alone in this, you know. We can strategize together," she offered, her eyes brightening with resolve. I nodded, grateful for her support, yet a nagging doubt pulsed at the back of my mind. Could we really turn the tide against someone as powerful as Mr. Thompson? The idea felt daunting, as if we were preparing for a battle against an unseen giant. Maya and I spent hours brainstorming ideas, her voice a soothing presence as I poured out my frustrations. Each suggestion she made felt like a stepping stone toward reclaiming my agency. We outlined a plan not just to confront the CEO, but to rally support from my colleagues. If I could show them that I was fighting for us all, perhaps I could win back their trust. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the fear of what would happen if we failed. The following days were a blur of sleepless nights and fervent discussions. My heart raced every time I thought of the upcoming meeting, a mixture of anticipation and dread stirring within me. I envisioned myself standing before the board, laying bare the consequences of Mr. Thompson's arrogance. The thought electrified me, igniting a fire deep within, pushing me forward despite the fear. As the day of reckoning approached, I could sense a shift in the air. My colleagues were starting to whisper about the changes I proposed, their curiosity piqued by Maya's enthusiasm. I felt a flicker of hope, a fragile flame in the dark, reminding me that perhaps I wasn't as alone as I had once thought. But I knew that the final showdown would be fraught with tension and uncertainty, a high-stakes game where the outcome could alter the course of my career forever. As I sat in the quiet corner of the coffee shop, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the sweet scent of pastries enveloped me, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within. I stared out the window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass, mirroring the chaotic thoughts spiraling in my mind. It felt like a temporary refuge, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. I needed to face the fallout and reclaim my narrative. Maya arrived, her usual bright smile dimmed by the weight of our circumstances. She slid into the chair across from me, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. I could see the apprehension in her eyes, and I felt a pang of guilt for dragging her into this mess. The last thing I wanted was to burden her with my struggles. "I'm trying to find a way to make things right, but every time I think I have a plan, it feels like the ground shifts beneath me," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the weight of her gaze, her unyielding support, both a comfort and a reminder of what I stood to lose. "You need to show them that you're willing to listen, Stephanie. They're hurting and they need to know you care," Maya advised, her brow furrowing in thought. I nodded, contemplating her words. The tension within the office had transformed from mere frustration into a deep-seated resentment, and it was my responsibility to bridge that chasm. As we talked, I reminisced about better times, team outings filled with laughter and camaraderie, moments where we celebrated victories together. Those memories felt like distant echoes now, overshadowed by the fallout of my decisions. I had to find a way back to that unity, to restore the trust I had shattered. Later, the final board meeting loomed before me, a daunting reminder of the chaos I had unleashed. I arrived early, the silence of the boardroom amplifying my anxiety. I could almost feel the weight of the empty chairs, each one representing a voice that had once stood with me. The stark, cold room felt like a cage, and I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I needed to confront the storm head-on. When the meeting began, the air crackled with tension. I could see the cautious expressions on my colleagues' faces as I stepped up to address them. "I know I've made mistakes, and I want to take responsibility for them," I started, my heart pounding in my chest. As I spoke, I could feel their skepticism, but I pressed on, determined to convey my sincerity. "I want to rebuild our relationships and restore the trust that I've broken. I'm committed to listening and understanding your concerns. Together, we can navigate this storm and emerge stronger," I declared, my voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath. I saw a flicker of recognition in some eyes, a glimmer of hope that perhaps this could be the beginning of something new. As the meeting concluded, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The path to redemption would not be easy, but I was ready to face the challenges ahead. In that moment, I realized that finding peace was not about erasing my mistakes. It was about confronting them with courage and a willingness to change. With renewed determination, I stepped out of the boardroom, ready to forge ahead, knowing that the real work was just beginning. I was prepared to face the consequences of my actions, no matter how daunting, because I would not allow my story to end in chaos. The news hit like a thunderclap, jolting me from my thoughts as I stared at the stock market graphs illuminating my computer screen. Red arrows pointed downward, a stark contrast to the hopeful projections we had discussed only weeks before. The figures were shocking, $1.2 billion. My mind raced, grappling with the gravity of what this meant for the company and for me. Each dollar lost felt like a dagger to my heart, and I could feel the sweat prickling at my temples, my palms clammy against the cool surface of my desk. This was no longer just a corporate oversight, it was a catastrophe born of arrogance and negligence. I could almost hear the echoes of the CEO's laughter during our last board meeting, dismissing my suggestions as if they were mere whispers in the wind. Now that laughter felt like a haunting specter, mocking my efforts to be heard. I remembered the moment vividly, the way the room had erupted in a chorus of awkward chuckles, the disdain etched on his face as he waved my claws away like a pesky fly. That moment had been my spark, igniting a fire within me that I could no longer ignore. But now, the flames of that ambition threatened to consume everything in their path. As I processed the fallout, my thoughts spiraled into a whirlwind of fear and determination. I could feel the walls of my office closing in, each breath heavy with the weight of impending consequences. My phone buzzed on the desk, but I ignored it, too engulfed in my racing thoughts. I needed to act, to reclaim control over this disaster before it spiraled further out of reach. Images of my colleagues flashed through my mind, their disappointed faces, the whispered conversations that filled the air with tension. I couldn't let this be the end of my story. I had to confront the CEO to demand accountability for the chaos he had unleashed. The thought sent a surge of adrenaline coursing through me, pushing aside my fear. I would no longer be a pawn in his game. With newfound resolve, I stood up, determination coursing through my veins like a lifeline. I would not be reduced to a punchline in this corporate drama. This was my moment to rise from the ashes, to take action against the consequences of my actions. I couldn't back down now, the stakes had never been higher, and I was ready to fight for my vision, for my team, and for the future I believed in. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs with courage. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready to embrace the chaos and turn it into my strength, to confront the CEO and hold him accountable. This was the turning point I had been waiting for, and I would seize it with both hands, determined to transform this disaster into an opportunity for redemption. The dim light of my desk lamp flickered over scattered papers and hastily scribbled notes, creating a flickering dance of shadows on the walls of my home office. I leaned closer to the desk, the wooden surface cool against my palms, as I pored over my ideas. Each page bore the weight of my frustration and determination, a chaotic blend of potential plans to hold Mr. Thompson accountable for the chaos he had unleashed. The scent of burnt coffee lingered in the air, a reminder of the late-night brainstorming session I had slipped into, fueled by a mixture of anger and resolve. My thoughts raced as I envisioned the possibilities, the stakes soaring higher with each stroke of my pen. I could see the board meeting in my mind, the faces of my colleagues twisted in disbelief as I laid out the evidence against the CEO, the arrogance that had led to our downfall. I had to be strategic. I needed to present a clear narrative that not only highlighted his gross negligence, but also showcased my unwavering commitment to the company and its employees. As I scribbled down bullet points, I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. What if this plan backfired? What if my pursuit of justice cost me everything? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that the risk was worth it. I couldn't allow my ambition to blind me again. This time I would tread carefully. I glanced at the clock, its ticking echoing like the countdown to a pivotal moment. Jordan's voice echoed in my mind, a gentle reminder that I needed to consider the collateral damage of my plan. I knew he would worry about the consequences, but I had to follow through. The door creaked slightly, and I turned to see Jordan leaning against the frame, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Are you okay? You've been at this for hours, and I can see the tension in your shoulders from here," he said softly, stepping closer. His presence grounded me, the warmth of his concern wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. "I'm fine. Just trying to figure out how to confront Thompson without losing everything. I need to expose him for what he's done," I replied, my voice steady but my heart racing. Jordan nodded, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. "Just remember, Stephanie, revenge can be a double-edged sword. You have to be careful how you wield it," he warned, his brows furrowing slightly as he crossed his arms. I appreciated his caution, but the fire within me burned brighter. I had to do this not just for myself, but for everyone who had suffered under Thompson's arrogance. As the night wore on, I continued to refine my plan. I envisioned how I would present my findings, the way I would draw the board's attention to the truth that had been buried beneath layers of corporate deception. The path was fraught with danger, but I was resolute. This was my moment to reclaim my voice, to not only seek justice for myself, but for those who felt powerless under the weight of corporate arrogance. My resolve hardened. I would not be silenced any longer. With each passing hour, I felt the pieces falling into place, the strategy becoming clearer. I was ready to execute my plan, and nothing would stand in my way. This time, the outcome would be different. This time, I would emerge victorious. The boardroom felt charged, like a taut wire ready to snap. I stood at the front, my palms slick against the polished surface of the table, the air thick with anticipation and dread. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, casting harsh shadows on the faces of my colleagues, each one reflecting a mixture of skepticism and expectation. Mr. Thompson sat at the head of the table, his expression a mask of arrogance that I could no longer tolerate. "Today I would take a stand. We need to talk about accountability, Mr. Thompson," I declared, my voice steady despite the thunderous beating of my heart. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. The faint hum of the air conditioning felt like a distant whisper against the storm brewing within me. I could almost hear the echo of my earlier doubts, but I pushed them aside, focusing instead on the faces in front of me, some supportive, others judgmental. Accountability, ha, you think this is about you, he retorted, a cruel smile dancing on his lips. The laughter that followed from a few board members stung like a slap. I had expected this reaction, but it only fueled my determination. I'm not here to play games, Mr. Thompson. The decisions you've made have consequences, and I'm prepared to face them with transparency. As I spoke, I remembered the countless hours I had spent crafting the proposal, the late nights filled with hope and ambition. Now, those memories felt like a distant dream, overshadowed by the reality of our current situation. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs, and continued with conviction. Our stock has dropped over $1 billion because of your arrogance. I'm not backing down until you acknowledge the damage you've done to this company and its people. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a mix of anger and adrenaline surging through me. The murmurs among the board members grew louder, a chorus of disbelief and intrigue. I glanced at Maya, who sat in the corner, her eyes wide with surprise but also admiration. Her presence reminded me that I wasn't alone in this fight. Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, his demeanor shifting slightly, perhaps realizing I was serious. And what do you propose? A pity party for your failures? He sneered, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his tone. I seized the moment, my voice cutting through the tension. No, I propose a new direction for this company, one that values integrity over arrogance. We need to rebuild trust with our clients and each other, I asserted, my heart racing as I laid out my vision. The room held its breath, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps I could really change things. As I concluded my speech, I noticed the shifting dynamics among the board members. Some were nodding, their expressions softening, while others remained rigid, unwilling to accept the shift. I had taken the first step, but now the real battle lay ahead. Would they support me, or would they remain shackled to their loyalty to Mr. Thompson? This ends with me standing up for what's right, and I'll fight for this company and its people, I declared, my voice ringing with newfound strength. The silence that followed was deafening, but I could feel a shift in the air, a crack in the facade of complacency. The stakes were high, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The weight of my decision felt heavy, but I knew I had crossed a threshold. I had confronted the CEO, and no matter the outcome, I had taken a stand for myself and my colleagues. The battle was far from over, but I was ready to fight for our future together. The aftermath of the confrontation left a tangible weight in the air, the kind that clung to the walls of the boardroom long after I had stepped out. My colleagues had gradually begun to lower their defenses, their expressions shifting from anger to contemplation as they processed my words. I could feel a tentative hope blossoming among them, a fragile flower breaking through the cracks of our fractured trust. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow over the room that now felt less like a battlefield and more like a space for potential renewal. In the days that followed, I worked tirelessly to rebuild the connections I had so carelessly jeopardized. I organized open forums where everyone could voice their concerns and share their ideas, fostering an environment of collaboration rather than conflict. The warmth of their laughter slowly returned during our meetings, a sound that had once felt like a distant memory. I felt a renewed sense of purpose as I navigated through the complexities of corporate life, determined to lead with empathy rather than ambition alone. One afternoon, while reviewing the feedback from the latest forum, I received a message from Maya. "Let's grab coffee, I want to hear how things are going," she wrote. I smiled at her words, grateful for her steadfast support. As we sat across from each other in our favorite cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped us, creating a comforting cocoon. "You've really turned things around, Steph. I can see the difference in how your team responds to you now," Maya said, her eyes sparkling with admiration. I felt a flush of pride at her words, a reminder of the journey I had undertaken. "It's still a work in progress, but I'm learning to listen and prioritize our relationships more than ever before," I replied, my voice steady. The realization that I had the power to reshape the culture of our workplace filled me with hope. As I sipped my coffee, I reflected on the challenges I had faced and the lessons I had learned. The chaos I had endured had not only tested my resilience, but had also opened my eyes to the importance of fostering genuine connections within my team. I was no longer just a leader, I was part of a community that thrived on collaboration and understanding. Meanwhile, the news of Mr. Thompson's downfall reached my ears like a distant thunderclap. The CEO, once untouchable, had been ousted after the company's significant losses and his inability to adapt to the shifting landscape. I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also a hint of sadness for the man who had once held such power. The corporate landscape was changing, and I was determined to be at the forefront of that change. As I walked through the office, the atmosphere buzzed with renewed energy, and I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced before. I had weathered the storm, and now I stood on the precipice of a new era, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. With each step forward, I felt the chaos of my past fade into the background, replaced by a clear vision of a future defined by integrity and collaboration. My journey was far from over, but I was no longer afraid of the challenges that lay ahead. I had found my voice, and I was ready to use it to shape not just my destiny, but the destiny of my entire team. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across my office as I reflected on the whirlwind that had been my journey. Each decision, each confrontation, had led me to this moment of clarity. I could almost hear the echoes of my colleagues' voices, their doubts, their fears, and ultimately their tentative hope. The air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee, a reminder of the countless hours spent mulling over strategies and solutions. It felt surreal to think I had navigated through the storm of betrayal and emerged not only intact but stronger and more resolute. I glanced at the framed photos on my desk, images of my team celebrating small victories, laughter shared over projects that had once united us. Those memories now served as a reminder of what I was fighting for, not just my career, but the very essence of our collaborative spirit. I could feel the weight of responsibility settling comfortably on my shoulders, each challenge I faced reinforcing my commitment to lead with empathy and integrity. As I sat there, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. I had learned that true leadership was not merely about making tough decisions, but about fostering an environment where every voice mattered. I understood that the path forward would require dedication and humility, but I was ready to embrace it. The world